You are now tuned in to DameSmiff.
Good morning. Welcome to episode 5 of Musician Talks. And today I want to talk to you guys about maintaining and nurturing a good environment for artists so that way they can grow. And I want to start with first identifying what a creative space is. A creative space is a little different than what you think how a office may function, in the sense that an office, its job is to encourage productivity and encourage organization and things like that. Make sure you keep your paperwork and files or whatever else you're working on in order, so that way you can have it at arm's reach and be able to find and organize everything you need to make sure your business or your venture is working properly. That's what the office is for. Now, a creative space is where you come up with ideas and solutions for whatever it is your venture is. So, for example, a creative space may be painted a little differently, so that way it evokes certain emotions and stimuli that would encourage creativity. But in another sense too, it doesn't function the same way as an office, but in its basic form, in that it's not set up the same way. So when you first walk into a creative space, you kind of want to have inspiration, if not immediately, but as quickly as possible. And so oftentimes I see people in their creative spaces, they'll put paintings or images of people and things that inspire them. They keep a soundtrack or maybe a playlist playing in the background, so that way their mood is adjusted to be in a more creative mindset. And another way I've seen people do it is their creative space is exclusive. They even keep specific people that aren't beneficial to what their goal is in and out of that room as far as access. So what that means is, for an artist, this can be extremely detrimental or extremely beneficial depending on how you manage this. And as an artist, I believe that this is one of, if not the most important rooms and environments to have access to. It's it's the difference between having a studio versus an actual rehearsal room. You see what I'm saying? So a studio, a lot like an office, is where you get all your ideas and music or whatever down onto a tangible form, be it a file or whatever, so that way it can become a product and you can become more efficient. The difference between that and a rehearsal room is that the rehearsal room is where you will have more freedom to make mistakes and try new things that you may have come up with on the spot. And what that allows you to do is work out the kinks in what you may want or not want to hear in your final product as an artist. Or you may come up with something totally brand new that once you're done with what you are working on, you can move forward to the next goal. But you can only really flesh those ideas out in a rehearsal room, or what I would like to call a creative space for an artist. Now, how do you identify your creative space? Like if you're an artist and you have a family and you can't really identify a room or a space or a garage or whatever in your house that you can dedicate solely to creativity, the best way you can start by doing that is identify what that space is to you. So as a musician, typically you're going to need to make a lot of noise. So being in the house might not be your best option unless you can soundproof it, which is, again, more money for you to invest in. It's a good investment if you can pull it off, but it's just more steps to take. It's up to you if you want to take that step as an artist. But you're going to need to make noise, and noise that isn't necessarily refined. It's going to be noise that most people would either find offensive or just unattractive, because you're working out kinks, you're trying new things, you're trying things that are off kilter, things you've never done before, unorthodox type of sounds, things like that. Just for the sake of creativity, and inspiration. And what that boils down to sometimes is a decision for artists to either build their own creative space or find a creative space that's already built. And that can be a bit of a task, especially for artists that aren't in major cities or just popular cities in general, because like I said in my first episode, there isn't really a community that's dedicated to musicians solely. There's usually a general art community, but when it comes to musicians, you kind of got it. It's very competitive when it comes to that kind of access to a creative space. And so, what you run into when you're in making your own creative space, is that you'll run into obstacles such as how much space will I need? What will I be doing? Maintenance, like making sure it's clean and healthy and things like that, in a safe space, because you don't want to just be in some garage with tools in it. So, with that being said, I think the best approach for an artist to find and maintain a good creative space is to think about what specifically you need as an artist. So, like I said, as a musician, you're going to need to make noise. So, having your creative space in an area where you have to share the sound space with other people is something to really think about, because I've seen people build studios in office buildings, which is cool, but most of their hours are late night because nobody's in the building, so that they can make noise and things like that. So that's more of a hindrance than it is than a plus at the end of the day. And so I've seen other people, they'll go to music stores or maybe just studios in general who have free space, and they'll let them rehearse like maybe trumpet or piano or whatever else they have to work on. And again, the problem with that is, if the studio is a running studio and a successful one, uh, you're going to be running against what their hours are and what their clients need and things like that, as far as sound and time and things like that. And so that can be something else to worry about. But when you're making your own space, the steps are, again, just as strenuous, but in the opposite direction. So meaning you would have to put up more work, more money just to develop your own space. And that decision is going to come down to you as an artist. I can't really just give you which option is better, because it's situational. Some artists that live in cities and stuff like that, they can't really afford to just go out and drop the bread and develop a brand new creative space for one artist. That's crazy expensive and kind of counterintuitive if you don't have a long-term goal for that kind of venture. So what they'll do is the previous things I said, they'll, rent out spaces and things like that and try to utilize people's time and space so that they can practice and rehearse whatever their creativity inspires. So what I want to talk about is how, when you do get that space, how you can nurture and maintain that space. Because I've noticed artists, when they do get these spaces, they don't treat it either as a business, or they don't treat it as something that's kind of sacred to what they have going on. And then I'll give you an example of that. Like, I've seen bands that, when like a big church or something like that, they'll let them use their worship room wherever the instruments are. They'll let them use their worship rooms for just practice in general, working the kinks out in their music. But it starts to become a bit of a hangout than it is like a place where you're actually putting in productivity and efficiency as a musician. And some people will say that's a problem in leadership, but I would say that's a problem in organization, because sometimes the leader kind of facilitates that behavior, meaning that if your leader is a person who's their creative space and their mind is for them to work out their issues creatively, everybody else will just kind of fall in line and work on their own thing. So then when it's time to come together as a unit, you're not really a unit, because you're all trying to piece together 6 or 7 different ideas in a large room. But to me, that's not a leadership issue. That's an organization thing. So if you go into the rehearsal space with your 6 or 7 members, or however many people you got, and you can set up a list of problems that you're working on for the day or for the hour or however long you have it, that can put a clear goal in front of everybody who's involved. And therefore, once it's done, then you have the decision to just hang out and be inefficient or not. That way you can make sure your work is getting done, and you can make sure, and you can kind of test who around you is being productive in your band or in your ensemble. So when it comes down to it, when people say it's a leadership thing, I don't necessarily fully agree, because not all leadership is great leadership, and not all leadership is um, right for each situation. Especially in creative spaces, you don't want to be so stringent in creative spaces, because it kind of tampers down new ideas and things like that. You want to let people kind of be able to explore their ideas and things like that, but with the pretense that you have a goal in mind. So as long as everybody keeps the goal in mind, I think you can have a healthier relationship with your creative spaces. Now, safety is a big issue when it comes to creative spaces. Like, people treat, I'll say, offices, like small business offices, they treat those almost like safe houses, in a sense. Like, there's maybe a key, a backup key, or a key code, a fingerprint, security cameras, and scheduled visitation times, like office hours and things like that. But when it comes to creative spaces, many artists don't view it this way until they start to get kind of like acclimated in their career. But I think it's a good habit to start, even if you don't, have everything in order just yet, because it'll develop a habit of making sure everything is in order, so that you have everything to be creative and be successful in what you're trying to do. And some artists, again, when you get into this kind of like creative mindset as an artist, you kind of lose the business aspect of what you're trying to do sometimes. So some people, they'll bring alcohol, they'll smoke, they'll bring in guests that have little to do with the art itself. They'll bring in, just any type of thing that has very little to do with the artwork, because they have space to do so, thinking that that's inspiration and creativity. But at the end of the day, what you're doing is you're exposing a lot of different things to what is supposed to be sacred, and what is supposed to be something that's unique to you specifically, or your band and ensemble. So you kind of whittle the energies in the room, become tampered. People may not be in the, like, you might have a situation where, I've heard this one, that some studios, they ban they ban bringing girlfriends, because girlfriends kind of ruin the vibe in studios, in the sense that if the girlfriend doesn't like the song, then the song is not going to be worked on as efficiently as it was before she got there. Or if the girlfriend is cold and hungry or whatever else she needs, you have to focus on her versus in that hour getting your work done in the studio. And it can work the same way in a creative space, because people, when they're in creative spaces that aren't their own, it's a creative space, so it inspires creativity. So then their sporadic artistic side may come out, and it might conflict with what you have going on as a unit with your ensemble, or just with what you're doing solo. And this is usually where artists get it fucked up with their creative spaces. And I mentioned earlier that you don't want to treat it like an office, but you want to treat it as something that's kind of like a church or a temple, or a place where you it's sacred. You need this, you maintain it, and you keep it healthy for the pure purpose of creativity. Whereas your office, you keep it safe and maintained for the pure purpose of productivity and efficiency. So just keeping that in mind as an artist can help you tenfold when you're trying to when you're in need of more inspiration, or you just need to work out the kinks on your performance. Because a lot of artists today, as I've seen, they'll record their records, maybe listen to it for a week or two, and take it straight to the stage. And the problem with that is you haven't worked out what that song, let's say a song, what that song will look like and translate to on a stage in front of people, and how you're translating your message and things like that, because you haven't had the time to go and actually work these things out in a creative space. You've recorded it in a studio, your office. That's what I would call your office, your studio. You recorded it in your studio, you mixed it, mastered it, got it everything in order. You got an album cover and all that. But at the end of the day, when it's time for you to perform it, you don't know what you're looking at until it's time to look at what you're performing. So, excuse me. And so, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to give you quick insight on how artists' relationships with their creative spaces is way more important than you may have thought before, or it's way more important than you think it is now. So that's episode 5 with DameSmiff, Musician Talks. And be sure to like, follow, subscribe. And if you're on Facebook, be sure to follow my Facebook page. And if you're on YouTube or whatever else, hit subscribe, share, and things like that. I also sell music directly on BandCamp. You can see me on there. I got jazz, R&B, instrumentals. The instrumentals and things like that are for subscribers only on BandCamp. So if you're an artist and you need some new music or just some inspiration, I have instrumentals there that you can buy and you can use, however you'd like. And then I also have exclusives that you can contact me directly for. But that's episode 5, Musician Talks, and we are out.